Lovely, thank you very much. So welcome everybody. Here we are today on Thursday the 19th of January for the Economies, Residents and Communities Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Angela Davis, your chair of this committee. So without further ado, can I turn to Rachel and ask, do we have any apologies for today?
We've received apologies from portfolio holders Councillor Jake, Jackie and Sandra and Jane Thomas.
Lovely, thank you very much. And do we have any disclosures of interest? Okay, so no hands up, so we'll take a silence to be no. And any declarations of party whip? And again, a no response there. So the main topic of our agenda today is to discuss the Corporate and Strategic Equality Plan. And I believe we have Catherine James here who's going to introduce this to us. So over to you, Catherine, thank you.
Morning, everybody. I will just share my screen now. So I'm going to give a short presentation. And let me know when you can see that.
Yeah, we can see that. Thank you, Catherine. Okay.
So the corporate plan has been on quite a journey to get to this point. So we have a draft corporate plan now, as you can tell, it's at scrutiny. It's been through numerous workshops and engagement sessions over this summer and autumn. Many people have fed into it, not just the cabinet, but wider stakeholders. And this plan has really been informed by insight and intelligence from a variety of sources. So one of the major ones that has been a data resource has been the wellbeing assessment that was conducted and published in March last year. And as resident and engagement and feedback, many various sources have fed into it, as you will see later on. So the wellbeing assessment, which is one of the largest pieces of insight that we've used, is something that all councils in Wales have to do as part of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015. And that act seeks to improve the social, economic, environmental and cultural wellbeing of Wales by requiring public bodies to work together to create a sustainable Wales. And it's intended to help to create a Wales that we all want to live in now and in the future. So whilst compiling the wellbeing assessment, we conducted a Living in Paris survey early on in the summer of that year, 2021, and then later we consulted and engaged with residents on the assessment itself, which was the Wellbeing Assessment Survey, and we'll look at the findings and touch upon these a little later. So it's important to note that the Wellbeing Assessment insight that we have, it was published in March 2022, and the report was compiled before then. Therefore, the facts that we're focusing on in the forthcoming slides are from that time period of publication. So at that time, there were 58,345 households in Powys. The average household size was 2.2 people. And at the time of writing, we had 3,500 people on our housing demand register. A quarter of those were already known to us, our existing tenants, and many required smaller accommodation, often 1 or 2 bedrooms. According to Future Trends report, the number of people living in single-person households is likely to increase in the future. And it's predicted that Powys single-person households will increase by 4.2% over the next decade. Powys already had a higher than national average level of single-person households, so this is going to put more pressure on the housing stock that we have here for future generations. So there is a real need for the availability of smaller homes that are affordable and sustainable across all of the county. Inflation in the UK has risen, as you're all aware, with increasing fuel, food and transport costs, worrying many across the county, and Powys is no exception. The cost of living in such a rural area has always been more expensive than the rest of the country, and as the cost of living rises, this will put some pressure on households. At the time of writing, 4,088 families were living in absolute poverty. 31% of these were lone parent households. So we knew we needed to do more to understand the situation of those living amongst our communities. 17% of people in Powys reported feeling lonely. So if we apply that to the population, there could be potentially 22,600 residents who are feeling lonely. And we know that as you get older, you're at a higher risk of becoming lonely and people are living longer. So there will be more need for help and support in the home. By 2043, the population of those aged 65 and over is projected to increase by 25.2%. Another impact of an ageing population could be a continuing rise in unpaid carers. So during the 2011 census, 12% of the Powys population, so 16,154 people, were unpaid carers, with more in the south of the county, particularly the Ustragynlais locality. And in the last 10 years, the ageing population has seen a large increase in carers. And we know when the new census data comes available from the census 2021, this is something that we would like to explore further. The coronavirus pandemic increased existing health inequalities, and certain groups were more vulnerable during lockdown. And we know that mental health issues have also increased since the coronavirus pandemic. And depression and mental health disorders are something to be aware of. In terms of the Powys economy then, at the time of writing, 79.2% of people were economically active and 17.8% were self-employed. In 2021, Powys had the highest rate of self-employment amongst all local authorities in Wales, nearly double the Welsh and UK averages of 8.9 and 9.4 respectively. 70% of Powys employees worked full-time, and 30% of those working age people aged 16 to 64 were in part-time employment. The median weekly full-time earnings in Powys was at £519, slightly below Wales at 542 and UK at 586. And the average household income in Powys was 33,458, slightly below Wales at 34,700 and quite significantly below UK at 40,257. We knew that 55% of households in Powys earned below the Powys average, and this was using CACI household data from 2021. 27% of all jobs in Powys are in the wholesale, retail, transport, hotel and food sectors, which is on par with the Welsh average, and 14% are in agriculture, forestry and fishing, which is well above the Welsh average of 3%. That's from ONS. Powys has the lowest gross value added per hour worked in the UK and has done since 2008. The reason for this is Powys residents work on average much longer hours than other areas, mainly due to our strong agricultural sector, and full-time workers worked on average 40.9 hours per week here, with only Herefordshire having a higher figure at 41.1 hours per week. Powys has maintained a higher rate of economically active residents, so those aged 16 to 64, than the rest of Wales. And in the last decade, the economic activity rate has remained stable, and we anticipate it will do so. However, there is a need for focus on the quality of jobs in Powys. We have high levels of employment in industries such as agriculture and tourism, and this, tempered with high rates of self-employment, long working weeks, and low levels of gross value added per hour worked, means that residents in Powys are working hard for low pay. And coupled with the rising cost of living, this could push more people into hardship. The average house price for all properties here in Powys was £216,998, higher than the Welsh average of £194,575. And out of the whole of Wales, Powys ranks 6th highest in terms of the housing house prices. So to understand housing affordability, we can look at the average house price against the average disposable income. And in Powys, average house prices are 11.8 times higher than the average disposable income. That's taken from the Land Registry 2021. Powys ranks 5th highest amongst the 22 local authorities in Wales for having the most expensive houses compared to gross disposable income. So we need to ensure that those residents who do not or cannot adapt to the new technologies are able to get online in terms of digital. We know that many properties can't receive 4G signal indoors, and according to the Digital Communities Wales report, 10% of people in Wales today are not online. So as more and more vital public services are being delivered online, there is a danger of certain people being left behind. We know that 12.2% of properties in Powys have an internet connectivity speed under 10 megabytes per second, and that 21% of premises in Powys are unable to access 30 megabytes per second. In terms of culture and communities, At the time of writing, 1 in 5 residents spoke Welsh. However, there was variation across the county from 54% of Welsh speakers in the Huntleth locality down to 8.6% in the 19 and Prestine localities. Most Welsh speakers were aged 5 to 15 years old, and we know that the new census 2021 data set that's been released shows that there has been a reduction to 16% of the population speaking Welsh overall. 32% of people volunteer in Powys, and those volunteers are likely to feel that things they do are worthwhile and have good general health. There are many benefits to volunteering. It promotes social cohesion, gives people a purpose, a sense of confidence, and helps them to connect with other people. There were 6,906 crimes in Powys during 2020, and the highest type of crime recorded was violence against the person. The Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation is the official measure for deprivation for small areas in Wales, and it looks at where deprivation is across Wales, from 1 being the most deprived to 1,909 being the least. Most of Powys is poor in terms of access to services, so just under half of Powys areas are in the worst 20% in Wales in terms of access to services, and Newtown East ranks 31st most deprived in Wales. And it's important to explore the reason for this and consider how we can tackle deprivation to improve well-being for future generations. In terms of the environment then, we know that enclosed farmland in Powys contributes to approximately a quarter of that in Wales and covers 47% of the county. In Powys, the majority of rivers are not achieving good ecological status. A range of pressures are compromising the health of our ecosystems, including climate change, pollution, abstraction, and invasive non-native species. We know that air quality is being affected by different pollutants, and climate change is influencing our environment, as we've seen more frequent flooding and changes to our weather. In terms of energy efficiency, Powys is a large county with many older, inefficient houses, and there is a reliance on solid fuels due to the location of many. And we know that many households have to run at least one car, if not more, due to the limited public transport and the location of their house. So in terms of the feedback then from engaging with residents, the Living in Powys survey was conducted in the summer of June, July 21, and we had a total of 475 responses. The questions asked were based around the 7 wellbeing goals, so looking at an equal Powys, prosperous, healthier, cohesive, and a globally responsible, and looking at Welsh language as well. So at that time, the top 3 priorities to put in a wellbeing plan identified were providing accessible services tailored to people's needs, tackling isolation and loneliness, and supporting increased digital access amongst residents who don't use the internet very often. So that was the first survey that was done, which helped inform the plan. Then once the plan had been pulled together in the autumn of 2021, during November and December, the Wellbeing Assessment Survey was out for public consultation. So this survey was a follow-up based on the findings before, and we had a total of 614 responses. A wide range of data was analysed, and the survey focused on 18 key wellbeing areas, and respondents were asked to pick the top 3 of the 18 they thought important or most important to well-being. So the top 3 were health and lifestyle, educating our children, and jobs and wages. And the least 3 important suggestions were Welsh language, forestry resources, and tourism. So at the end of last year, we engaged on the draft corporate plan, so late November through to December, and we had 614 responses in total. And the feedback provided from this is going to be reflected in the new corporate plan. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Catherine. I apologise, everybody. So I was just thanking Catherine for that presentation, and I'm going to open up the floor now to the committee to ask any questions on that section of the reports. So first to put the hand up, Danny. Good morning, Danny. Would you like to ask a question?
Good morning, Chair. This is going back to the 4G signal. I'd like to know, is it an infrastructure issue, or is it a house insulation issue? Because it does make a difference, the amount of insulation you have in your housing. If it's an infrastructure issue, I much suspect it is probably an infrastructure issue, because traveling around a lot in rural areas, the 4G signal, or any signal, isn't limited to indoors. It's also outdoors as well. There's many places I go that I do not get signal. But for the more urban areas that aren't receiving 4G indoors, should the communications companies be providing like a 4G indoor hub? They used to do it for 3G hubs, but 3G disappeared, and they did not put anything in place for, like, it used to connect to your Wi-Fi, and then it would give you signal. But yeah, we need more information on that. Why, what is the problem? But rather than saying this is the figure, please. Thank you.
Who would like to respond to that?
I'll come in, Chair. It's not an area that I would proclaim to be an expert in, but I think, you know, it's a good question, Councillor Danny. I do think there is an infrastructure issue across the county. There are some areas, some pockets, places that wouldn't be able to access 4G, and I know that the Economy and Regen team have been certainly working with communities to try and develop what they can and look at innovative ideas in the areas. So there are a number of communities that they've been working with. And then I do know that there was access, but I'm not sure if it's still available now, whereby Welsh Government were providing grants for rural areas, that where you do not have access to certain network and infrastructure, they would provide a grant to try and so that individual households can try and access the 4G network, obviously digitally through the waves. And then deploy that within the household. I'm not sure if those grants are still available, but as I say, I'm not an expert in that area, but I think it's twofold, really, Councillor Danny. I think it's both infrastructure, and then we're doing what we can, obviously working on a national level to try and improve things.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware, and I think a few other members of this committee are aware of the work that Diane's team's been doing to try and encourage companies to bring mobile connectivity to Mid Powys, and certainly Brian's involved with a group through Broadway Partners, they're called, that are looking to do that. Catherine, you've just put your hand up. Would you like to add?
Just a quick one. Yeah, this week we've had a meeting with someone who's part of the Mid Wales Growth Deal, and we've been asked to help map the situation to show not spots and things like that. So that will help in order, you know, in order to target which areas are not have got poor connectivity. So that's something we're going to be looking at in the near future.
Oh, that'll be really useful. Thank you, Catherine.
Could I
Sorry,
just
Emma, yes, please.
The question there is aligned with objective 1 within the draft corporate plan that's before you today. So that access to services and the way that we move, whilst digital isn't accessible for everybody, and some people absolutely need face-to-face, it is one of those elements where we're looking at access through all different channels, and that's an element then that would be aligned and explored through that the objective 1 of the draft corporate plan that's before you today.
Yeah, thank you for that, Emma. Ian, you're next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellent presentation. Thank you, Catherine. In terms of the level of response across Powys, we're looking at roughly average 7 or 8 people per ward who've actually bothered to answer your questions. Is that statistically relevant?
Yeah, well, I will add to that, Ian, because I did a little calculation, and on the Living in Powys survey, we've got 0.008% of the population of Powys, and it's hard to sort of see, I agree with you there, how that is representative. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear comments on that.
Yeah, in terms of, I agree with you, Councillor Ian, but in terms of survey responses as they go, that is quite high compared with other surveys that we've done. I'm not saying it's great and we need to do more, and we've got a public participation strategy which will be coming out shortly. and we need to do more than just surveys. We need to think of more innovative ways. So if anyone does have any great ideas on how to engage with people, that would be really useful.
May I come back on
Yeah,
that,
please come back, Ian. Your screen
Um,
is doing strange things, but we can hear you loud and clear, so carry on.
Okay, so I mean, the danger is that with the response level that we're seeing here, it's essentially becoming self-selecting. And I know from our village Facebook, for example, out of the over 1,000 people that are active on our local Facebook village page, the number of really active people is a very, very small number. And they, you know, the armchair experts that we all see on Facebook. And I'm just wondering if what we've really done is through the survey methodology, we've really selected for a very particular type of respondent. That's all.
Okay, I can see Councillor Jake has got his hand up. Would you like to come back on that, Jake?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, we did set out, and when I say we, I mean the collective of we, because of course we did take this to a broader training session internally, brought it in front of members, and did take the time then to explain the various channels of engagement that we were using to try. So it wasn't one method, it wasn't all just social media. Various methods to go out with paper, conversations to draw in a whole range of responses. And of course, we did lay down the challenge to all 63 members of the council, employees of the council, to complete the consultation themselves and actually at least reach out and get one other person. And that sounds very modest, doesn't it, to get one other person to complete the form. But when you see the sort of level of feedback, it's quite clear that actually not all members did fill it in, and certainly not all employees filled it in. And I don't think this consultation is unique in that respect. We do have, as local government, low levels of response of people wishing to engage with us. You'll see, as you say, that you've got a range of Facebook warriors there that are making lots of noise, and we're very conscious of that and want to try and get differing views. You do capture those views, but unless we actually engage ourselves and engage others meaningfully, it's not going to improve. I don't think this is unique to this corporate plan. It will have been in terms of previous documentation, and actually it goes right across the public sector with low levels of engagement. So I think there's a general disappointment, but I don't think it's specific, Ian, to this plan, and certainly not you know, the efforts we're making at this point. But I think we can only endeavour to do better in the future.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Jake, and I'll certainly take that on board. I think I did try to reply to this survey myself, but I know that there have been a number of surveys where I click on them, and for myself personally, I have no idea how to answer the question. So I guess a lot of it is in the wording. It's not just in where the survey is put out for replies, but if people don't know how to reply. But yeah, take your point on board there, that perhaps we all have a little bit of work to do in that. Councillor Adrian, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. I can see my camera's not working for some reason, but anyway, and thank you, Catherine, for the presentation. My question would be about the house prices. It indicates that house prices are reasonably buoyant in Powys. Is there a stat to follow up? You know, since COVID, there has been a move to the country, generally across the UK. If so, if that's happening in Powys, is there a stat to show what age group is moving in to Powys? Because that has an effect on future planning. Thank you.
We could look into that for you. Obviously, the house prices coming from that land registry and the average disposable income, that housing affordability, obviously that came from ONS as well. But yeah, we could look in. I could get someone to look into that and feedback to you if that's acceptable, Councillor.
Yes, thank you. But you know, I noticed generally in our area, when there's a new development in some of the villages and the smaller houses tend to have been bought by retiring people from other parts of the country. And that does have an effect in future planning, obviously, because we are an aging population. If that's the trend, it's just kind of making it not worse, but it's contributing to the stat. And just one other point, I'm being a bit pedantic here. You list 58,000 households in Powys, but in the next pack from the census of 2021, it lists in excess of 60,000. Why is there a difference there?
So when the wellbeing assessment was pulled together, it was at the end of autumn 2021. So at that point, we only had the 2011 census households to go off.
I understand.
Recently, in the last sort of 5 months, we've been slowly getting little data sets through from the 21 census. We haven't had all of them yet, but that is one of the ones. So that would be why that's there.
Okay, thank you.
Emma, you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in there?
I could just come back on the earlier point. It links with the census, but the first question that Councillor Adrian asked, and in respect of the population, I'm afraid that we haven't seen significant inward migration. We've seen a slight increase in the overall population of Powys, but it's very slight. And I'm afraid to report that we still are an ageing population, and an ageing population greater than other areas in Wales. So there is a challenge for us around that working age, the younger population, the working age population, and then supporting that older age population. And that's a challenge we're experiencing right now.
Okay, that's an interesting thing to hear, Emma, because sort of anecdotally and just in my own ward, I was aware of a couple of families, younger people either moving back or moving into the countryside and citing being able to work from home. And I had hoped that was a trend, an upward trend for our younger working age. So no, just a skew in the data, a small scale. Okay, Councillor Gary, you've got your hand up next.
Thank you. I'd just like to come back on Ian's point with a couple of comments really, and then move to a question if that's all right, Chair. But yeah, thank you, Catherine and team, for pulling this together and presenting it in a very succinct way. And I know there's a lot of data and information that sits behind it. But Ian raises a really valid point, and I know we've discussed it before at other scrutiny ones. And I just wonder if the Future Generations Act sort of does place a duty on us to really have regard for our communities and what their wants and needs and desires are. And I wonder if we're trying to do it the wrong way by putting surveys out ourselves. Should we not be looking at using activity that's already happening on the ground? And I know a number of us as councillors went to a climate assembly webinar about how they're working in North Wales and what they're trying to do a bit differently, not led by the local authority, I'll be honest. But that was interesting. But also there's a number of councillors here that have been heavily involved in community place planning. And I do feel they reach that level of engagement where communities really come together. They really talk about their priorities, their worries, their stresses, their strains. And I wonder if there's an opportunity for us as a local authority to work out how we capture the data that others are already gathering and feed that into the likes of these strategies. I don't know if anyone wants to come in. That was sort of a point really rather than a direct question.
I'm happy to come in there, Councillor Gary. Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, the approach that we've undertaken in developing the plan is not purely based on a survey. The wider contribution in terms of the wellbeing plan is the data in terms of the facts of what is happening based on the data that we have. Obviously the responses were down to people's views, but separate to that, we've also engaged with partners. We've got citizens panels, focus groups that already exist, PAVO in terms of third sector. I think there is more that we can do in terms of accessing the wider data from other groups that already exist. And one of the things that we've undertaken, not specifically in the council's corporate plan, because we feel we can do better as partners, but under the public service board wellbeing plan that we're currently developing, we've actually got one specific objective and a step around that evidence and insight so that we can strengthen the aspects that you're referring to there. Had really good discussions with some partners on that already, and the where we've got to in terms of our expertise and the systems that are available to us will allow us to do that well, I think, so that we can make sure that any evidence and information that we do collate, we can use more broadly across our partners to inform. And I think the other element, of course, that we need to be bringing through is the children's voice as well, because that's key in Future Generations Act, and about how we're engaging with the schools and those community groups and sports clubs, etc. That also will shape the thinking.
Great, thank you. Chair, am I able to pose a question, or do you want to bring Jake in?
Jake, did you want to respond to that particular?
Yeah, it was just in relation to that. I mean, I think it's fantastic that we can actually broadly harvest information from a wide range of sources. And I'm certainly a great advocate of doing things right down at the community level, like the place planning work that you suggest, collate that, use it for a variety of means, obviously not seek to misuse what is or misrepresent what is collected. I think the difficulty is with something like a strategic plan of a council. You know, it is very hard for people to seek to engage in that. So, you know, we did try and break it down into small components around, you know, the environment and so forth, but it's still very dry. Having done lots of work on development plans over the years in a whole range of different sets of circumstance, actually getting people to engage with something that is beyond, if you like, their immediate community or area of interest is very, very difficult. And I will say, if you want people to engage with, you know, a development plan, there's nothing better than to have something controversial, at the, you know, in a settlement, whether it's an incinerator or you know, some other development that is going to provoke interest. That's how you do it. I'm afraid it's always difficult with this type of thing, but I do certainly agree that we should harvest more, and I see that you know, that Emma and Catherine have agreed with that.
Thank you, Jake. So Gary, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, it was just about I think we struggled a little bit in the Scrutiny Committee around who's this corporate plan for, internal, external, bit of both, and I guess I would argue or raise a concern that I'm just fearful that, are we being ambitious enough with setting 3 targets for a 4-year plan? And arguably, I would say target 1, we're already quite well on the way on that. We know that we've got to improve access to services, and our digital work has been ongoing for a number of years, right back from leader times, where we've really drawn down digital connectivity money and made improvements. So I do see an improvement in that. And then you could argue objective 2 is quite an internal one. That's great. Yeah, of course we want to be a sustainable employer. We want to be creating opportunities, and we want to be paying that real living wage. Absolutely. That's not hugely ambitious in my humble opinion, I'm afraid. And then perhaps to create difficulty, I see objective 3 as being one that, yeah, absolutely, that's the sort of thing we want. But I worry about how much control or influence or input the local authority has to in that objective itself, whereas 1 and 2 definitely internal, can work well on those and deliver against them and set targets and things like that. 3, I see a bit harder, and perhaps then that comes out through the plan is that little bit of mismatch of what we're doing internally and what we're trying to support and do for our communities, or the way that we're talking about it in the plan is perhaps, for me, a little bit confusing. Thank you.
So in respect of the plan, the plan does set the direction, certainly for us as officers, for the next 4 years by the time we move through this first year of new cabinet, and that's really important for us in respect of aligning our resource to deliver the objectives and outcomes that are set by the executive, which are the cabinet. However, we do have a requirement to publicise the plan, so we will also provide an easy read version for the public. So Councillor Gary, you're quite right, it is a bit of both, I'm afraid. However, internally there's the next level of detail then available through the integrated, and will be available through the integrated business plans for each service. There's also then the alignment in terms of the budget. So the council need to set the budget, medium-term financial strategy. And once that budget is agreed, that will then also inform the plan, so that we need the budget to align in terms of its delivery. So you'll see in the plan as it stands at the moment, that element is non-existent, because we need to get a budget approved. I think the comment that you make in terms of the level of ambition is a fair challenge, but one of the things that's facing us this year, and I think it's the first time certainly in my career in local government, is the economic challenge is greater than anything I've ever experienced in 24 years. And what we need to do is make sure that we don't set the organisation up to fail. And we need to make sure that actually less is more. So if we can focus on doing some things really well and make sure that we're able to provide services to those that really need it, that's a good place to be. And at the moment, we don't think people are that we're not as efficient as we could be in terms of access to services right now. So we need to focus and improve in that area across a variety of services. So not just customer services in terms of telephone answering or web forms, actually, real assessments in terms of social services, admissions in terms of education, planning applications, environmental health visits. There's a whole host of things that are delivered. But from an economy perspective, and we've kind of got a known unknown. We know we've got difficult years ahead of us, but we don't know to what extent. This plan, regardless of what that financial envelope is, allows us to still move and progress and deliver elements that are important to the public, and that we've picked up through not just the engagement and our wider knowledge and understanding that comes through in terms of compliments, complaints, etc., but also as members, your local knowledge and what you're hearing in terms of the doorstep conversations that you all have, because there has been a contribution from all members across the council over the not all members, sorry, representative of members across the council contributing to this plan. The third objective, you're quite right, it's a longer term in respect of outcomes, and the challenge here was around cause and effect, or cause and symptoms. But actually, we felt that, or certainly the cabinet felt strongly, that we've got to try and do something, even though we know we can't control everything. There's wider variables and greater influences. But as a strategic leader of Powys County Council, representative of constituents and the 133,000 population, we've got to do something. And even if it's even if this serves a number of cabinets over a number of years to try and improve things and reduce the level of poverty. We do see different levels of poverty in Powys, as you'll be aware, and in certain pockets, and some is hidden, being the rural local authority and geographical area that we are.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
That's great.
Lovely. Well, if I can just follow up on Gary's point there, because I could see that number 2 and number 3, as in supporting good quality, sustainable employment and tackling poverty, are intrinsically linked, because if people are in good quality employment and well paid, that helps with that poverty link. So I was very interested that in the Wellbeing Assessment Survey, jobs and wages came up in the top 3, and yet tourism came in the bottom 3. And as tourism is a key employment avenue in Powys, that seemed to be some disconnect there. So I'm not quite sure how we sort of square that circle, as it were.
I mean, that's the view. That was the view of those people that responded, in terms of their own.
Well, I guess that sort of backs up the point being made that the respondents were not a wide cross section of the population. So we have to sort of take that with other knowledge, don't we?
Yeah, I think the second objective is the right thing to do in respect of what we can do as a main employer within the county, because the number of individuals, both within the council and then within the wider schools community that we employ, over 5,000 individuals. So we can have a greater impact if we are paying the real living wage as an employer.
Yeah.
And then the ambition of the cabinet is around becoming that accredited living wage employer. Well, that makes a difference for those that are not familiar with what that means. It actually gets us to a position where we contract with other organisations and subcontract, that they also pay the real living wage, and that could make a difference in the wider economy for those individuals. And it's back to that cause and symptom element, Councillor Angela, and you're right to make the links, that if we can actually increase the number of people who receive the real living wage, that can make a difference for them individually and their families. That makes a difference in terms of local economy, if that's spent locally, etc. And actually, by doing that, rather than addressing the symptom, we're actually dealing with the cause at the outset. So it's upstream, but it will take some time for that to feed through. And I think that's the point that Councillor Gary was referring to earlier, that third element of poverty will be further down the road. But there's also, if you think about poverty, the element and the ambition around developing council houses and the social housing, that can make a difference. That, you know, we've got people on the housing waiting list currently, and if you link in terms of understand the demographic of aging population, a lot of people on the waiting lists are, you know, single, needing 1 or 2 bedroom properties, and we're aware of where those are needed. Well, that in itself can help address the, you know, part of the real living wage, and the housing offer can help with poverty, homelessness, those elements, and you know, we can there are a lot of other factors as well.
Yeah. Councillor Chris, if you'd like to come in there. Morning, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not on there. A really interesting presentation, so thank you, Catherine, for doing that. I think you brought it more alive. From just being cold statistics, you gave it a meaning, which I think is helpful. Just in relation to the response rate, just want to pick up on that, because I do agree that low numbers then make you sometimes then feel, has it been given legitimacy and that on there? And in the past, I've been involved in things like town talks, which have been facilitated at a local level. And those have found with an independent facilitator, have found that you get greater engagement on there. And I don't know whether we've tried that as an option going forward. Sometimes having councillors present in some of those events can be an enabler, but it can also be a disenabler, because some people then see those individuals having to lead that discussion and that debate. So by taking them out of it through an independent can sometimes get greater honesty and opportunity to learn what the true feelings of the community and that discussion going ahead. The other thing is do we have any links to academia? Because academia do a lot in relation to surveys in order to have a valid thing for an academic thing. It's got to really be around about the 12 to 14% mark in order to give you a valid return on there. So if we've got any links with any of those to see whether we could learn from that, I don't know if that's being considered. Just in relation to the data that was in the presentation, I was a bit surprised when you put the average household income at over 33,000. It wasn't one that I thought would recognise as an average. But to me, it's about disposable income, what people have got less. And the reason why I raise it is that only this morning I've had something come through about the utilisation of food banks, and that is growing. So therefore, that's saying to me people don't have disposable income in the same way. And I think we just got to be careful of using old statistics that are taken a little while back and being able to make decisions now. It's got to be more live, and I just want to be reassured that it is live data that we are then utilising to be able to move that forward.
Thank you. Yeah, no, so we do use live data. We've got our Wellbeing Information Bank, which has over 50 reports on there. I can put a link to that as well. So that's got many useful insights on there in terms of the population split by the 13 localities and projections going forward to 2040, so we can model things. So we've got much on there. But in terms of the presentation earlier, it was just to give you a flavour of the wellbeing assessment itself. Was a huge piece of work that we undertook and was published in March 2022, as I said. And so really, we didn't want to sort of not use that, because a lot of work from not just us, but Health, Natural Resources Wales, and the whole of the Public Service Board fed into that piece of work. So it was the biggest insight and intelligence document that we had really at that point in time, but other things have been utilised since. We didn't just rely on that one thing alone. But in terms of utilising academia and stuff, we do use the Wales Centre for Public Policy and other places, Office of National Statistics, and research from other places. That is, you know, we do use qualitative information to sort of reinforce what we're seeing in some of the quantitative numbers, if you like.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris, that answers your question, yeah. So I've got Councillor Anita next, but I just want to check, Councillor Arwell, you did have your hand up, but it's come down. Are you satisfied your question's been answered?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my first question was answered, but obviously I do want to come in at a later stage on the finance of it. So okay. I don't know, when do you feel appropriate I come in later on a little bit, or?
Yes, okay then. Yeah, we'll go with Anita now then. I just I didn't know if I'd lost you off my screen.
No, my query had been answered from Gary, but yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arwell. So Anita, over to you.
Firstly, hello everyone. Good to see you all after some time out with some health issues. So delighted to be back. So picking up on a lot of, I think, what has been said is about the corporate plan having greater ambitions and greater clarity on this point of collaboration and involvement, which I note are two of the 5 ways of working. You know, picking up again on the low participation rates of the questionnaires, I was surprised to see no mention of terms like co-production or stakeholder engagement or partnership working, despite there being a general trend to those ways of working, and slightly our hand being forced by budgetary issues as well, and the difficult economic environment. You know, a general sort of sense within the corporate plan seems to echo what we're hearing here about doing it sort of with our residents. You know, the council as an enabler and a facilitator. There is some mention of community enterprise, but I think we could state sort of higher ambitions in terms of social enterprises. A bit more on the sort of the what, you know, there's a few things mentioned like internet, and I think leisure centres are mentioned at one point, but nothing on arts, community facilities, transport, which would all really feed into loneliness and mental health. Sorry, I just wrote quite a few things down here. So how that would all feed into the 3 objectives, with us working more closely with partners. I appreciate that the corporate plan has to be things that we can deliver, and we can't promise what partners would deliver, but I still think we can set objectives there in terms of partner numbers, for example, taking the living wage example, you know, setting. Sorry, am I cutting out? My video is going funny.
Your video is going funny, but we can hear you loud and clear, Anita.
Okay, maybe I'll stop my video because that's confusing me. Yeah, setting targets in terms of, you know, taking the living wage example that Emma mentioned, you know, there could be a target of, you know, we will work with X number of partners to encourage them to take on the living wage. We could also set targets on engagement rates, as I said, feeding into what others have said about this concept of co-production and closer engagement. And then that would sort of drive our objectives a little bit higher. So objective 1, if we're working with partners and we're ensuring that we're really getting the voice of the residents, you know, we can set a higher objective 1 of being more informed and more able to share information on a wider range of services. And we can be sure that we're really meeting the needs and we're not just responding to those, you know, 5 people of the 900 who like to be very loud on Facebook, that we're actually responding to the 900. In terms of objective 2, you know, we can be more satisfied that we're encouraging new employment opportunities. So it's not just council employment, but it's also, as we said, driving engagement with partners to help them offer more opportunities and training.
Anita, shall we, if you're going to, you've
sorry,
obviously got a lot of comments, and that's fantastic,
yeah.
But shall we give Emma the opportunity to answer under each objective?
Sure, yeah.
So you've made some points there under objective 1, and Emma's got her hand up there, so she's...
my hand up was in relation to the previous element, which was I just wanted to inform that we'd also, in terms of the engagement, etc., we have feedback from Welsh Government and Future Generations Commissioner Office on any of the work we've done, which I don't think Scrutiny may be aware of. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. In respect of the specific objectives, it may be more appropriate for Cabinet members to come in. I wonder whether Councillor Jake has got anything specific to say there. But in terms of the measures, those are still work in progress, because we need to move to a position whereby instead of counting what we've always counted, and I feel quite strongly about this just because it's there and we have the information available to us, we need to move to results-based accountability, which then tells us about how much of something we're doing, how well we're doing it, but really what difference it's making. And that's the bit that I'm really interested in, because we can be busy saying we're going to do a number of things in a plan, but actually if it doesn't make a difference, you can question why we're doing some of those elements. I think they're really good comments from Councillor Anita, and what we've tried to do, there's the next level of detail. This will be the strategic element, the next level of detail that we move into in respect of those integrated business plans and the actions that services undertake and the approach in which they undertake this. There would be an expectation that where we can, that we do things with partners, that should be standard. But actually the communities themselves, which is an important factor, that came through strongly from the Cabinet. But also maybe we've not been explicit, but it's sort of implicit, maybe because of the way that we're used to working as officers. That involvement is one of the 5 sustainable principles that we have to undertake as part of the Future Generations and Wellbeing Act. And I've just reflecting as Councillor Anita was stating her points around, without making the plan even greater, how do we make sure that people understand the approach that we would undertake? Because there are a number of links within the plan that take us to that further detail. And I can see that Councillor Gary, for instance, has put in the chat, this is already happening on the local nature partnership, whereby bilingually that partnership, which is led by the council, is going out to communities to engage with them. So there's that understanding and embedding and that practice. And I think the challenge that I've got in terms of leading the team is how much we put in the corporate plan without it becoming, because the next criticism, which I've had in previous years, is that the plan's too big. and so I'm juggling with that.
I mean, sorry, I'll just say one small sentence and then allow people to feed it. Isn't it, Emma, a lot of it I think can be just dealt with just a few tweaks in language, you know, just putting a few more of those key words like engagement, like co-production, like stakeholder, like partner. Those words seem to be lacking, and that's great to hear that the intention is there, but if people pick that up, I don't think it's coming across.
Okay, no, that's a fair point, and we'll take that on board. Yeah, we'll definitely give that more thought, Councillor Anita. It's really helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, I know you've got more to say, Anita, but perhaps we'll look at the first part, do it in the 3 parts, objective 1, 2 and 3, and that might help your fellow committee members and the portfolio holders to respond, because clearly you've got a lot to say, and that's fantastic. So thank you very much.
5 months of being stuck at home.
Yeah, no, it's really great to have you back with us. So we'll go to Councillor Bryan now.
Can I just come back? Sorry, Jake, Angela, apologies. I've got a meeting in 4 minutes time, so I'm going to have to go to that. I do apologise, but I've got a contribution to make in that meeting. I just wanted to come back quickly. I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of some of this language, Anita, and we've certainly missed you over and your valuable contributions over the period of time in which we have sought to co-produce this plan. So co-production certainly internally was very big on our minds. We were determined that this wouldn't be a plan of the executive driving the council's vision forward that was solely owned by the executive and cabinet. We wanted to co-produce that. I think we've had mixed success in that. I think there have been some really sound contributions, and you've just made some more now at this late stage. And I'm sure we can make some tweaks to accommodate some of that. But one of the, and Emma has said much of what I wanted just to say quickly, but the previous plan that we've been working on, the 2025 vision, certainly is not a perfect document. It was a document that was too busy, and I think if we'd have tried to carry that forward, it might well have sunk us as an organisation. You know, it wouldn't have floated in relation to the economic constraints I think that we find ourselves. It was busy, noisy, confused, and actually that's why we've tried to distill things down, and as Councillor Gary has said, actually take some of that detailed that work through projects like the Nature Partnership, like the local development plan consultation, all of which can engage meaningfully in their various areas of work. So we've tried to take things out, focus on the key things which we think are doable and relevant at a strategic high level, and of course declutter a lot of that. And that's why it is as it is. But you will see much more of the service business improvement plan work coming forward to fill in the detail over time. But I think what you're saying is absolutely valid. We've missed that contribution. I look forward to your active engagement as we go forward. And sorry, Chair, I do have to dip out now, and it's a shame because it's a really positive debate this morning.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jake. So we'll go to Councillor Bryan now then. Anita, your hand is still up at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'm taking you back a little bit. I've been looking through my diary with the broadband, sorry. I just wanted to let members know there is a meeting on the 8th to the 3rd in County Hall with Broadway, who are the company installing it in Llanothel, Llanafon, Dihonno, and there's a lot of confidence there. And me as a member, I'm very confident they're going to be getting broadband in. I can't remember the speed. I think it's 150 by the autumn. But if members will speak to Mr. Shepherd, the assistant broadband officer for Powys, it's a very good presentation, and you don't have to tie yourself. You can join into the Welsh voucher scheme.
There we are. So maybe that's something for Danny to take a note of. So did you have a question there on this section of the plan?
Well, I'll go back to our leisure centres. Obviously, I feel that I would have thought a lot of the questions that need to be reviewed would have already been there by the decisions that were made and returned back the other way. So I just wondering, why was it taken to 2025 to get it all sorted? And obviously, I got to put it in. We say we're going to be open and honest, which I think that we weren't. I, as a member, took a lot of flack, and with a few other things. So I just feel it's perhaps a communication, and obviously the time it takes for the leisure centre. 2025 is a long way away.
Okay. I'll come in there, Chair. I know
Emma.
that there's been a commitment made, actually, when we wrote this, the world has changed as such in so many months, and there is a commitment in respect of reviewing the leisure provision this year, actually, and undertaking that review. That was a commitment that's been given by the Cabinet. But in terms of doing the review is one thing, then deciding upon anything and its implementation will take, it will have a lead in time. So 2025 isn't too far away. I can see that Councillor David Selby's got his hand up, Chair, and I just wonder whether it would be okay to bring Councillor David in at this point, as I appreciate this is his portfolio.
Yep, David, welcome.
Always welcome Emma's support on these things. Now, yes, obviously the world has changed, and the world has changed because of the financial pressures that we're all under, and that was the reason why things happened as they did before Christmas. In fact, are ongoing. My commitment, as I've given, and I just want to make it again here, is that the ambition is to get underway as quickly as possible. We're working on terms of reference for an engagement exercise and review of the service now. That will have to come back to scrutiny, Chair, with your support and permission, so that you can agree that the terms of reference are correct. And then we have to engage with communities. It's a complex area, but if I could just say within my portfolio as well, I think the library service is a good example of co-production these days, in that we've got libraries that are volunteer operated, volunteer run, supported by the council. And it's a model that could be adopted in many of our services, where we have to work with communities in different ways. Because although we talk about Powys being a rural county and all the pressures of that, clearly I sit in an urban environment where my ward is almost completely social housing in a town, and the pressures, etc., on delivery of services are very different in a place like Newtown as they are with most of the rural areas that people represent. And I celebrate the differences, but we have to adapt to cope with that as well.
So if I could just come in then there, David. So the review is about to begin. You're setting the terms of reference for that review, but what it says in this document is what we will do, that by March 2025 we will have evaluated the leisure provision. I think communities will be very anxious to know, what does that mean for their provision in the interim time? So can we assume no decision will be made until the full review has occurred, has taken place?
Absolutely, yes. But that's my intention. What I can't control is what happens in the economy. And that applies to the whole of the corporate plan. But that's the intention, is to work with communities, and we're not going to decide one leisure service by another. And also, if I could say, the leisure services is more than the leisure centres and the swimming pools. The leisure services is about pitches outside. As I say, leisure centres without roofs are just as important and vital to our service as those with roofs.
Absolutely. Okay, Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Chair. My question is around how we as a local authority are ensuring that these key objectives that we're setting in here and the work below them are going to support our sort of ambitions around climate and net zero targets, and indeed help address the nature emergency that we've declared as well. And perhaps officers or cabinet members, I know Jake's had to go and Jackie's not here, but can they confirm the approaches that we're taking or looking to take, or how we're going to embed those two things within strategic documents such as this?
Yeah, I can come in there, Chair. When we were developing the plan, do we have a separate objective on climate and the biodiversity element, and then so we did have separate objectives, but then what we found actually, and this is where we've got to, is it needs to weave through everything we do. We need to think about our impact on the planet with the decisions that we're making, the same as we do on the societal aspects and the human element. And so what we're going to do is update our impact assessment so that the decisions that are made going forward don't only take into account the Future Generations Act, the Welsh language, the socio-economic duty, etc., but there's a fundamental element on climate and that biodiversity, so that that has to be considered as well as those other elements with the key decisions that we bring before the organisation. And we think that's the best way in terms of weaving that through. There is though a link in the plan to work underway in respect of the nature, I can't think of the correct terminology, but the nature partnership that you referred to, there is actually a biodiversity plan and also a climate plan that we continue to work on, and we've definitely got groups working on those as well. So we are looking at everything through the lens of climate and biodiversity, and that's really important, and that was a very strong message from the Cabinet as well to us as officers.
I just wonder whether you've got the ability to think about, a bit like Anita's sort of request, that perhaps within objective 3 you could add a little line at the end of that hints to that says something like, whilst having full regard for nature and climate, or something, because it doesn't really come through in words. And I absolutely get the approach that you're talking about, that we don't want to silo it, we don't want to embed it in any single document. It needs to be across the whole local authority, officers, staff, everywhere. But with those 2 major things, if we don't get that right, we're gonna really struggle, and in our 3 objectives we don't spell it out.
We haven't explicitly put it in the objectives, but on small page 8 or large page 23 of the pack that is before you today, what we've got is a section that says what other areas do we need to consider throughout the plan. We've specifically referenced climate and nature, tackling the climate and nature emergency there. We've put links to the Nature Recovery Action Plan, so biodiversity and resilience of ecosystems duty section 6, the climate strategy. We've made reference to the impact assessment, so looking at climate and nature decision wheel there, and then we've also drawn out equalities, and I know you didn't ask for that specific element, but equalities and also the local development plan, because of course all of those elements will have an effect and need to be considered across the whole plan and the actions that we take forward. Really important that this is embedded and not seen as something separate.
Yeah, no, and I take your response to that, but I guess I fear when we start communicating around this, if an agency just picks up our 3 action plans or 3 objectives, sorry, and you just look at those in silo without seeing all of the detailed information behind it, we don't mention climate or nature emergencies at all, and how we're going to support that, and we've declared them both. So anyway, something to consider perhaps when you're doing your final drafts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So, Councillor Arwell, would you like to come in now, please?
Sorry, Chair, I was going to call you leader then. The one other thing that's come to mind, sorry, and still to answer Councillor Gary, we are also, we've got an objective in the draft wellbeing plan for the Public Service Board for all partners on strong communities, and a specific objective as well around climate and nature in there, so that we're strengthening the elements there as well. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that earlier.
Okay, thank you for that. So Adwell, over to you now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's very sort of robust and an ambitious plan, and in everything in what we've got in the plan happens in the next 4 years. We'll be in a very good place, because obviously you mentioned climate and nature, so social service transformation, adult social services, education. But at the end of the day, nowhere in that document does it say how it's going to be funded, because we all know the issues that we've got at the moment, and they'll be highlighted now over the coming sort of 6 weeks with budget and council tax increase, cutting sort of spending. So my worry is how are we going to achieve all this? There's no point putting the plan in place if we can't afford it. So I'd just like a comment either of Emma or certainly the portfolio holder for finance. Thank you, Chair.
I'm happy to respond to that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor David.
Yeah, pleasure. I think what we've got to appreciate is that there's a direct link between this corporate plan and the transformation plans, the corporate transformation plans for the authority. It goes without saying, you're quite right, Councillor Alwell, we can't carry on funding services within the county the way we currently are. And that's where the transformation programme comes into play. But just to refer to this year's budget as an example, when I delivered the budget programme to Cabinet, I stated that it was a budget for the future. And the reason I said that was the fact that despite £16 million worth of service efficiencies, we've not actually implemented severe deep service cuts. So we've actually allowed services to be maintained, and we've set them up on a fairly strong platform going forward, and a platform that we can attempt to deliver service transformation from. As far as futures forecasts are concerned, I think the majority of commentators currently are accepting that we're heading for a recession. The forecasts are that national debt will be somewhere between 96 and 99% of GDP by 2026. Now, unfortunately, the majority of public spending comes through public borrowing. And if national debt does reach that level, then there's going to be very, very limited scope for public borrowing. And the forecasts are that for the next financial year, we'd be lucky to get an increase of about 2% in settlements. The year after that, about 1%. That'll take us into 2026. And that could be negative. You know, there are knowns, but currently there appears to be some consensus that there are going to be serious financial restrictions on us. And that just takes us back to what we were saying earlier on, the importance of our transformation programme, because we simply can't carry on delivering services in the way we are, because what we're doing basically, what we will be doing in the future if we carry on as we are, is delivering second-rate services to the people of Powys, and that's something we don't want to do. So we've really got a number of reviews planned with within this plan, which are essential to the transformation element of our programme going forward. That will involve, if you take education as an example, we all know that there are far too many schools in Powys. There are far too many surplus places, and that has to be addressed. And it's by addressing issues like that, and it will involve some school closures, unfortunately. And I'm more than aware about the emotion around that because I've experienced it myself. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to the type of service we're going to offer to the residents and the children of Powys with regard to education. And my experience is where we do actually apply a transformative programme, then the results of that are significantly better and delivered at less cost. And that's what this is all about. But what it's about basically is delivering more for less. And when I say more, I don't necessarily mean more schools, more facilities, etc., 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 but delivering better standards and mitigating any adverse impacts that a reduction in actual sites, for argument's sake, of schools, etc., might cause. So that's the challenge going forward, and that's a challenge for our heads of service and the other portfolio holders to plan this transformation into their programmes and deliver it so that we can ensure that we maintain services within the county at less cost. And the other point I'd just like to raise with regard to this year's budget, obviously, it's not just setting the services up, it's setting a financial platform up as well to deliver this going forward. And that's why we've also got to look at levels of council tax, because that does impact directly on our base going forward. And by applying a council tax this year, which is significantly, it's well below the rate of inflation. That's the first time in many years, actually, that I can remember a council tax set in Powys below the rate of inflation. But that wasn't hard this year because the inflation rate is so high. So, that wasn't too difficult. But it's significantly lower than inflation, and that in itself. But it does allow us to contribute to the base for next year to take us forward. If we'd have come in, for argument's sake, with a council tax of zero this year, all that would have done would have reduced our actual budget base finances next year, and in all probability we'd had to increase council tax significantly more. So I'm pretty confident, you know, that we're heading for a sound financial footing next year to take us forward. I know some commentaries mentioned things like that we've sort of raped our reserves. I'd just like to make that assurance now that we haven't used any reserves to finance this year's budget. The reserves have been used to finance we haven't used any reserves to finance next year's budget. They've been used to finance this year's budget because of the deficit that's developing this year, because of the significant financial pressures that we've seen economically, you know, within the nation as a whole, and that's through inflation increases in the interest rates. So even our reserves, even though they're very, very limited, I accept that, but they are protected and they're on sound basis to take us forward next year. So I just thought I'd mention that one, because I did see some commentary about the fact that we were actually raping our reserves. We do recognise that there's significant risk within next year's budget, but we've actually contributed an extra £1 million to the risk budget to help mitigate that. So it is a sound budget to take us forward to deliver this corporate plan. I'm not saying that we'll be able to deliver it all in 4 years, but certainly, you know, I'd like to think that we can deliver the majority of it and tie it in with our transformation programme and offer first-class services to the residents of Powys. Thank you. I hope that answered that.
Thank you, Councillor David. Would you like to come back on that at all, Councillor Arwell?
Well, no, yeah, just to thank David for his comments, and I'll be watching with interest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that all of us across the county recognise that the financial situation has changed. Households are struggling themselves, but I think it's going to be difficult, isn't it, to see how we can deliver services. People are very passionate. Residents want their services in their local areas. So I think we're sort of coming full circle, aren't we, to talk about how we communicate that in meaningful ways that our residents can understand and can feel that they're going to feed into those consultations. So I think that's going to be key. But anyway, that's just a comment, really. So do we have any more questions? Chris, come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's more for clarification. I'm sure this is happening, but again, it's a build on the resources. Obviously, I do take on board the points that Councillor Anita made before about co-production and partnership. Can we just be assured that there is a partnership and collaborative work going on with other key partners, because the delivery of some of our objectives is going to be reliant on those partnerships with, like, the health board and with the third sector. And I just want to make sure that within this, that one, they're having sight of it so that they can contribute to the discussion and the debate, so that we're moving plans together, you know, together. So it is inclusive rather than being just one component part. We don't need to be working in silos. We need to be working more collaboratively. And I look at that from the health board perspective, particularly.
Absolutely, Councillor Chris. In terms of the way that we work together and develop, there's closer working than ever happening with the health board currently. Certainly, just in terms of winter pressures, but the discussions that we're having about the long term in the system and how things need to change. So, you know, adult social care transformation doesn't come a transformation in isolation. It has to be in work with partners, the health board and the third sector. But actually the transformation that Councillor David was just referring to, and you know, the elements in terms of this plan, we've also got the growth deal, we've got the North Powys Wellbeing Programme. We are also looking at the partnership arrangements around, you know, growing our communities and the money that we have secured from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and what that means in terms of those communities. Then if you think in terms of housing, we can't do that on our own. Again, understand the needs of the communities, working with them, responding, trying to use local contractors where we can, etc., etc. So you know, the only elements in part that we could do on our own are things like agreeing that the Powys County Council becomes a real living wage employer. That is a matter for the council, but to become accredited, it's more broadly. And actually, what we would like to see is our partners doing the same. So again, we very much have to do things together in order to be successful and deliver those high quality services that we want our citizens to receive. There is something as well, picking up on Councillor Andrew's point around the conversation that we have with our communities and about managing expectations, because I think it's fair to say that, you know, we cannot continue to provide services or the totality of services or the way that we deliver services that people may be used to in previous years. We need to look at that and look at how we deliver the best services within value for money for our communities and those most in need.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Gary, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. It sort of comes back into some of Emma's points there, but just a bit of assurance perhaps from the officers or other councillors on this one, that how you're able to ensure that this plan is integrated, understands the very numerous other plans out there, not just from us, but from our sort of key strategic partners in the PSBs and the other strategic boards and things like that. We know there's a lot of them out there. We're about to hopefully launch a sort of corporate plan for the local authority, and that's a really strategic document. Just can you give me a bit of a flavour how you're trying your best to do that?
So I think when we've looked at what we need to achieve as a local authority, we're actually also the lead organisation for something like the Public Service Board, and we facilitate that. What you won't have seen in the public domain are the conversations that we've been having with each of the partners around their own plans that we share between us, so we've got that understanding and discussion. Actually, where together we can add value and make a difference and shape elements, understanding the unintended consequences of things that we may do that could impact on them. So the budget is an example where we've had some really good conversations with partners around, these are the sorts of proposals that we're putting forward in the budget. What does that mean in terms of yourselves? And other organisations have their own plans that are set out in legislation that they have to take forward as well. So things like the integrated medium-term financial plan for health, they call it the IMTP as an example. But we also engage with police and also the national parks and also Mid and West Wales Fire. And I think the important element here is, and this is where we've had to think hard as officers in terms of supporting the Cabinet's ambition, is around, if we can make those alignment, and that we call it the golden thread. So if we're clear about what is required in terms of legislation first and foremost, then from a strategic level, our partners, and then as an organisation, if we've got that alignment and we deliver on our corporate plan, we know we're also assisting in terms of the delivery of those other plans. And that's something that we've focused a lot on in recent years, so that we have a plan that we can work to, but actually the outputs and the impact of that is sort of a ripple effect across other partners. It's complex. It's a complex landscape.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I get a really strong flavour that you're absolutely doing the best that you can, but it's always that worry, isn't it? How does your work impact others and vice versa? Yeah. And it seems to me that you're having really good conversations around that. So yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gary. Councillor Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. It's a comment on the question, really. Emma hinted towards it early on in the presentation about we don't want to set ourselves up to fail with objectives, and Councillor David has explained that the finance part of it, it's tricky the way we are at the moment, and it probably, some of these things will be very slow to evolve. I was relieved in a way to hear Emma also saying that a lot of the nature and climate and carbon changing things will be weaved into all decisions. So that's a good way to go forward. But to set timescales in it, which are difficult, for example, the one on carbon neutral council by 2025, that could be a bit ambitious with the way the finances are. A comment on that would be useful. Thank you.
I think it is absolutely, it is ambitious. It is a challenge, but it's the right thing to try and achieve. What we are considering, we need to make sure that we've got a costed decarbonisation plan. So as we move forward with the budget, I think this is the next sort of level, and also looking at the grants that are available and what we can do with our partners. Hence why we're suggesting from a public service board perspective that one of the steps that we look at there is around climate strategy. The other elements that's already underway, actually, I don't think Nigel Bryn is with us, but I know he's already looking at the funding that is already available and how we can invest in things like green energy to reduce the cost, some of our energy costs, because they're a challenge right now. And that's not only within the local authority, but that's in other assets that the communities benefit from. And so they're just working through that currently. It's not an easy area. It is challenging, but I do believe we're trying, you know, we're educating ourselves in that subject matter and trying the best we can to be more innovative and understand our use of carbon and how we reduce it. The other element, of course, is the requirements from a Welsh Government perspective. So when we're putting forward things like our schools transformation, any new school we build has to comply with the requirements of Welsh Government and is working towards that net zero element, and we have a number of those in the pipeline. But it is things like, as well, any new houses, how do we look at the sort of the retrofitting, how do we reduce the energy costs that we're using even within our own assets in County Hall as an example, or our office spaces. And you'll be aware that we're already reducing, work is underway already to reduce the number of offices that we're utilising across the county to serve our population.
Thank you. Can I just ask then, in relation to electric vehicles, I mean, that's obviously something, but the carbon footprint, I mean, that's unachievable with 2025, surely.
I can see Matt Perry's with us, and I'm wondering, Matt's probably better placed to try and respond to that query, if that's okay, Chair.
Of course. Good morning, Matthew. Nice to see you.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, in terms of the vehicles, as you're probably aware, we've got 3 new electric sweepers. We've got the new RCV vehicle, which is based in Brecon, and you are right that the cost at the moment for purchasing those vehicles are a lot more than your standard diesel or petrol vehicle. But we are building that into our replacement program. So by 2030, ultimately, all our fleet needs to be electrified, essentially. So any new fleet that we buy now, we have to obviously consider now that it has to be electric. So we do believe that as more and more people and authorities are using electric fleet, the cost will come down. But just to give you an example, you know, an RCV that's electric compared to an RCV that's diesel is 100% more in terms of cost. So it is something that we do need to factor in terms of going forward and how we plan it. So yeah, that's it, Chair.
Thank you. Danny, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. It was just a question from Matt. Will the depots where these vehicles are based, well, eventually all the depots, I suppose, will they be put in green energy charging solutions such as solar or turbines or anything, so they can be charged on site greenly?
Yeah, so that's part of our plan as well, so that infrastructure within the depots is geared up to deal with all this extra charging. So we're looking at a number of solutions, looking at where there's battery powered. All these different solutions are being sort of looked through at the moment. So absolutely, because the demand on the infrastructure is going to be quite high. When you think we've got 9 depots across Powys, we've got well in excess of 100 types of vehicles. There's a hell of a demand. So yeah, it is something that we are factoring in now as we progress over the years.
Is there any provisions already in place, or is it coming directly from the grid?
From the grid at the moment, yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Danny. So I was going back to the Stronger, Fairer, Greener plan, and I was looking at the ambition to complete 350 new council homes between 2025 and 2031. And obviously, as we've heard, that there are currently 3,500 people on the housing waiting list. That's in demand. But at that rate, it would take us 50 years to meet that demand. And that's assuming that there's no increase in the demand for social housing. But given what we've heard about the cost of living wages versus house price, it sort of gives an indication that actually the demand for social housing could raise in the future. And I'm looking for comment really on that, because I accept what you say about we've got to set targets that are ambitious, realistic, but are achievable. Given in the previous plan, there was the 2025 vision, there was a target for 250 houses, but the end of administration report stated that only 118 had been built. And whilst there were 109 waiting to be built, they were held up by planning and environmental constraints. So how do we set a target that based on the demand is unambitious in itself, and yet based on experience of the past is also unachievable? So
I think one of the things that you've got to take into account there is affordability from a local authority perspective as well. So there's a housing revenue account and a business plan that's put forward. It is subject to our own funds, but also from Welsh Government as well. And whilst and then you've also got to take into account the trades and our ability to draw on the tradespeople to build the houses. I think that whilst anyone would want to increase the numbers even beyond the 350, the reality is that we just wouldn't have the tradespeople, and we haven't got the finances in order to increase that right now, unless something changes on a national level. I know Councillor Matthews he was with us at the start of the meeting, but isn't here now, and I'm sure he would have liked to have responded to this. The phosphate is an issue. There is work that continues on that, but I think we've still got to set a level of ambition to keep people's minds on this, because it's the wider impact on the economy as well. So we need to address the phosphates issue as an organisation, but with partners as well and government, so that actually we can address some of the causes that we're seeing at the moment in as you say, in terms of the wait list. So I think it's about how do we address this, how do we keep those conversations, how can we influence and shape some of this element, because 350 is better than nothing, whilst accepting that maybe 1,000 would be wonderful, but we just can't afford it.
Yeah, I totally accept that and take on board all your comments, but what I'm saying is that 350, while still a small number, is 100 more than last year and over 200 more than what we actually managed to achieve. So it just, a query on the numbers, but yeah, I take on board all your comments.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Councillor Anita, you had lots of things you wanted to ask. Have they been covered now, or would you like to come back in?
I think mostly, yeah, I guess it's just finishing with some reassurance. There's been reassurance on the intention to include partners, but maybe can I mention the points I had on the objectives now? Would that be the right point? If we were to take on board a lot of the discussions today about partnerships, about engagement, the key sort of changes, I guess, that come out of it in terms of the objectives would be a little bit more ambition, I guess, in a nutshell, and a little bit more reach. So for objective 1, we'd be able to share information on a wider range of support services, so not just only our own, but I think this conversation has focused quite a lot on that partnership working. The second objective, again, about ambition of encouraging employment, not just as council employees, but also a little bit more on our I'd like to find out a lot more about the Mid Wales growth deal, for example, and other things that are going on with economic development, and the influence that we're having there on good employment and training opportunities. And then with objective 3, how we could achieve a better depth and breadth of service through partnership working, and a little bit more information on our ambitions there.
Okay. Does anybody want to comment? I think we all agree with you there, Anita, and that's been the sort of feeling throughout the meeting. So nobody's got any comments on that. So I'm just turning back. Sorry, go on, Anita.
I see that David Selby's on there. I don't know if you could say anything about economic development at this point. Be interested. Sorry, absolutely. I'm catching up on quite a lot here. I appreciate I'm catching up on 5 months and that can't all be done in one scrutiny meeting.
The Mid Wales Growth Deal and Levelling Up Fund and Shared Prosperity Fund are in their complex areas. That doesn't mean we shouldn't, but we are engaging in all of those. Shared Prosperity Fund is new, the first local groups or meeting is in 2 weeks' time, and there will be information provided from that. If I remember rightly, and I'm sure unfortunately you missed it, Anita, we did Diane did a briefing on economic development as a members development, and I think as we move on we should do that regularly, and talk about the way in which we can both take advantage of, in effect, external grant into our economy, how we're working with local business and community, all of those things we can talk about. And I think, or a scrutiny session, I think if I start talking in detail of each one now, then it will be difficult to do so, not a large audience, but they are absolutely key to our opportunities going forward, and I'll gladly provide more information when I can.
I think for Anita's benefit, when we've had a member training programs, they've always been recorded, so we'll have to have a look, see what you've missed and see if we can help you find those, because I know myself, I do occasionally look back on either the slideshow or the recording of a training session, so it might be a good way to help you sort of come up to speed, as it were.
I'm sure there's a set of slides, Angela, which may be in a set of slides, but I can share that, and I'll look for that afterwards myself.
There we are.
Yeah, I've just put that in the chat. Actually, I have kept note of the training sessions, and I think most of them there were recordings, so I will be working through them. Thanks.
So yeah, so if you need any help on that, you know, come and ask us, ask myself or Emma, or yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. Emma, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say apologies if you can hear dogs barking. They're doing a very stunning job in the kitchen. I just wanted to mention around the transformation portfolio, Councillor David touched upon it and the need to transform. And I think whilst the transformation portfolio is not explicit within this plan, it's not intended to be, but there will be a separate, we're developing it as now, so some of the transformation will continue with this new cabinet. So for instance, the Transforming Education Programme, the North Price Wellbeing Programme, the Growth Deal, as examples. We'll also continue with digital as an enabler. We've started work on recruitment and retention because we knew we needed to transform that area, so we've launched that element. But also we will be doing more work around social services transformation, where people live transformation, and that community area. And I think as that information starts coming together, you'll see how it pieces together that actually, whilst all of the detail isn't in the corporate plan, because we've tried to keep it that high level strategic element, you'll see in terms of meeting some of the aspirations within the plan, our approach is delivery through transformation programs, which form part of the Stronger, Fairer, Greener transformation portfolio. And I think the lesson for me today, listening to the discussion, is how do we, and I don't know the answer yet, so I'm going to take this away in terms of thinking, but all of these different mechanisms and all of these different elements, I kind of see it like a jigsaw. There are lots of different pieces to the jigsaw to give the complete picture, and the corporate plan sort of sets the direction, but actually there's all these other pieces that come together to give the greater picture. And I've got to think about how do we position, how do we present that so that you can see the totality, and how do we present that totality in the most simplistic way without undermining the complexities and the depth within it. I don't know the answer yet, Chair, but I'm kind of reflecting on the conversation today, that there are things that I am familiar with and know and how it works and linkages, because it's been my job for some time, that actually, as certainly for new members, but then the thinking is wider public or anyone else that wants to engage with it, how we do that. So there's a bit of a challenge for us, and we'll take that away and consider it. So Chair, I just want to say thank you very much for the contributions today. There's a lot for us to take on board and consider. There were a lot of things that we could answer. There's some of the language that we need to take away and work through, and then we can do that and move that forward. But also, just to say, for those that may not be familiar with this process, we will review the corporate plan annually. So we've got the opportunity to develop and for that to evolve over the years, specifically if anything new comes in or something changes, or indeed to update with any learning that we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emma. So I just want to make sure that everybody who has attended today has had the opportunity to speak. So I'm just going down the list who we haven't heard from. So we've got James Langridge Thomas, and you came in yesterday for our pre-scrutiny meeting, and I just wanted to check, do you feel that all the points were covered? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Thanks, Councillor Lancher. No, it's nothing to add from me. Thank you all for your feedback. That has been very, very useful, and we'll take it on board and look to incorporate it within the document.
Thank you, James. Thank you. And we have Cabinet portfolio holder Richard Church. Richard, is there anything you would like to add?
No, I don't think so, Andrew. I had added a couple of comments in the chat. I'll just try to be helpful, but I've got nothing to add, and I've enjoyed listening to the discussion.
Thank you, Richard. And we got Sarah, committee member Sarah. Were any of your questions? Have we covered everything, Sarah? Do you feel that?
Yeah, everything covered for me. I mean, the one thing that I think we've always struggled with, and I don't necessarily think is perhaps Powys as a local authority, but it's engaging people to commit to the surveys and.
Yeah, absolutely. How we build in more responses. So if there are no further questions, really, just summing up then, myself, I've been sort of making some notes as we go along, and I think what's coming out for me is that importance of clear communications with localities and with residents, and part of that is how we get responses to surveys, and taking on board what Councillor Jake said, that as councillors and town and community councillors, we do have a responsibility perhaps to try and help the local authority get that local voice across. And then we all felt it was important now that as a local authority we help and support communities to deliver the services they want and need. So that's going to be that partnerships and collaborations and working with others. And we talked about the timelines and the targets, and ensuring that they are ambitious but they're equally realistic but achievable. and yeah, so hopefully you can make something of that, and that it'll be of use in taking this document forward. So thank you very much, everybody, for your input into that. So the next item on our agenda is our scrutiny work programme. So Wynne or Rachel, do you want to lead us through this?
Sorry, Chair. Microphone's a bit slow in unmuting.
That's all right.
It's all set on the agenda, to be honest with you, unless there's any items that members want to suggest for adding to it. I do think we probably need a session between members of the committee and ourselves at some point. We've got a whole list of items on the sort of proposed items to come forward, and I think we need to do a bit of scoring work to sit down. I think I did look, and I think I've mentioned it to all the chairs. I pulled from the recent report from the Centre for Public Scrutiny and Governance a little sort of template which was giving an indication of how we might want to score items when we're considering them for where they should sit on the list. And I think perhaps we should go through that exercise as a committee, work through the list, and again, it'd be useful to have Nigel as the lead director at that meeting as well, just to go through and see what else we need to put on there, so we can build the programme up a bit more than it is. Because I think it's we've got some items on there, and I think for the next month you're going to be very busy, particularly in terms of the budget. But after that, then we just need to fill out the programme and have something organised for the next 12 months, so we know exactly where we're going.
Okay, so I see on the agenda then our next meeting is the 30th of January, and that's the budget scrutiny.
Right.
So do I assume there's no pre-meeting to that? The budget will be delivered in a presentation?
I'm having a discussion with the Section 151 officer, Jane, about that one, because I think we probably do need one, because there's a lot of new members who've obviously not gone through this process before. So that's something I sort of imminently need to chat to her about. So watch the space basically in terms of that one, Chair. But that's also, we've got some work between Rachel and myself to time sort of scale this one, because we'll need to have, you've obviously got a number of heads of service coming in before you, so we'll need to schedule actual time scales for when everybody will turn up for their section, because it's quite a bit of work for you as a committee at the moment.
Okay, well, we sort of need to set that ASAP, because obviously we're the 19th now and the 30th is not far away. Yes, so in light of that, we had a discussion in the pre-meet yesterday, because there was a suggestion from a committee member that could we have the pre-meeting immediately before our meeting to make dates easier? But actually the overwhelming response to that was no, I'm afraid. Members of the committee and indeed officers of the council felt that it was really beneficial having the pre-meet a couple of days, if possible, before the main meeting. It gave us all a chance to go back and review papers and look at more questioning, etc. So I'm really sorry to the committee member that was hoping that would happen, but I'm afraid that's not going to be happening. So there we are then. So we'll leave it with you, Wynne. We'll wait to hear a date for the pre-meeting for the budget scrutiny, and we'll wait to hear a date for a work programming session then. And that brings our agenda to the end. So thank you to anybody listening in. Thank you to all officers, portfolio holders for coming to answer our questions. And we end the formal section of this meeting. And then the committee, if you could stay online, we have our self-evaluation.